Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. So the final sort of item today is Google finally opening a retail store in New York. I mean, they had flirted with this over the past several years. They were going to open a store in Chicago. I believe they had talked about New York before. They've done some pop-up stores. They've done store within a store. But they've never had a dedicated retail sort of flagship as this store seems to be. And it's almost exactly 20 years after the first Apple store opened in Virginia. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was just going to say, moving from a position of essentially unrivaled strength in NLP and machine learning to one of unrivaled weakness in terms of physical presence and historical track record of customer support anyway for Google. And the three of us were chatting offline about potentially what a missed opportunity this has been for Google, not just to sell hardware devices, which I've never owned a Google Pixel, but I know plenty of people who have and have been fairly happy with it. So it seems like they've done a pretty good job on the hardware front, but they've missed the opportunity to scale that beyond the consumer into the business market. And I think anyway, it's been a missed opportunity for them to really get, they've done some of these get your business online seminars, but I feel like it's a real place for them where they could have packaged a sort of business connectivity hardware offering with a marketing support genius bar in a really cool experience. If that was an area that leadership at Google actually wanted to invest in. And I have a feeling that this, I would predict that Google retail actually begins and ends in New York and maybe a couple of other cities, because they're going to realize that it doesn't scale very well and it's not something they do particularly well. So we'll see what happens. I've been wrong on Google predictions before. I've owed Mike many beers over the years, but it doesn't seem like an area of historical investment for them, and I'm not sure they see it as critical to their long-term success in the same way that Apple does.
One thing I noticed about this store is that it's being placed in their Chelsea building, where they have thousands and thousands of employees. That makes me think that it's as much about giving those employees an opportunity to experience the real world, which Google has a gap at, as it is about the consumer. And if they use it for that, that might be very valuable to them, and they might stay at that even if it's not successful.
Well, that's
as a pure retail strategy.
It's kind of a face-saving move in that regard too, because they can use it in that context and not go beyond that, and it serves a purpose for their employees. I mean, it's kind of like the Google stores on their campus, or they have one or two like that, retail stores. I totally agree, David. I mean, years ago, this was a conversation I had with somebody about how Google could really, before really they had hardware, how Google could really set up a Genius Bar like educational offering for small businesses to learn about Google products, to learn about Google Ads. I mean, they used to do those Google U seminars. I remember, what feels like 30 years ago, but not quite that long, Sheryl Sandberg standing up and introducing Google AdWords and likening it to Yellow Pages, in front of a small business audience. And then they went off and separated the groups into beginners and more advanced. And you could, if you truly had the scale that an Apple does, which is a lot, you could have a place where people could come in and get educated, ask support questions, and it would be quite a valuable channel for them. But I agree with you that they're probably not going to make that commitment.
I'll just close with one additional comment, Mike. I think you're sort of, public face for employees to interface with the real world, that kind of comment. It's interesting, the timing of this relative to all of the sort of antitrust, anti-big tech sentiment that seems to be out there right now. And I think that there are plenty of app makers that feel antagonistic towards Apple as the ongoing court case is proving that's happening today. But I'm not sure that that there's quite the same level of resentment among consumers towards Apple as there is towards Google and Facebook. And this may be one way to try to put a slightly more human face on a faceless trillion-dollar multinational corporation. So,
Well, just to follow up on that, I apologize for extending things, but just to follow up on that, one of the subtexts in all the Google presentations was, "We understand you don't trust us. We know you don't trust us." So they were just reiterating, privacy, 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 privacy. We never do this. We never sell your data.
We never drive streetcars down the street and pick up all your Wi-Fi ports
right,
that are open. We never do that.
Right. And so that was interesting to me to observe. And also, that's consistent with the Gmail messages that people are seeing about privacy. And then Apple has a new ad, which I linked to in the newsletter today, which is pretty interesting. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a UK ad, and it shows somebody moving throughout their day, going into different stores, into taxis, and going home, and a progressively larger group of people following the person. And these are the trackers, right? This is the physical manifestation of all the ad tracking. And then the guy presses the don't allow button, and they all disappear, right? It makes it very, very concrete. It's a very clever ad, and pretty hard for the Facebooks and the Googles of the world to overcome, just on an emotional, visceral level. So, all right. With that, everybody have a good rest of your day, weekend, evening, morning, whenever you're watching or listening to this. And thanks again for listening.
And go Blazers! NBA playoffs are kicking off this weekend, and those of us in the Pacific Northwest are pretty excited. So,
all right.
Blazers are
Portland Trailblazers. Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
All right.
A bunch of arsonists. All right. Anyway.
Arsonists or
Bye-bye.
Marijuana enthusiasts. All right.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.